Sabi mala. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. This is Hala Al-Haj Hussein, Trade Advisor in Healthcare Sector, Department for International Trade. Thank you all for accepting our invitation to attend the Department for International Trade and the Arabian Enterprise Incubators webinar. In this webinar, we will talk about the opportunities in healthcare and life science in Saudi Arabia, and we will introduce the Arab Health as a great opportunity for UK companies to promote their services with overseas buyers. We will have today actually a list of speakers who they will give information about the healthcare market in Saudi Arabia and about the market in general, in addition to introduction to the Arab Health event. We'll have today Yazan Shukair, Senior Consultant in AEI, to introduce the Arab Health. And we have Stuart D'Souza, CEO of AEI, to give general idea about the Saudi market. Ken Anderson, expert in healthcare, who can give us an overview about the healthcare sector in Saudi Arabia, plus opportunities and challenges. Sophie Zuzman, Market Manager for the Gulf and North America. Sophie can introduce the Department for International Trade and Life Science plans in Arab Health. And then we have Fabiola Bukuti, Middle East Program Manager in Healthcare UK. She will talk about the Healthcare UK stand and their team in Arab Health, plus their plans during the Arab Health. At the end of this webinar, we are happy to answer any question and clarify any concerns regarding how to do business in KSA and regarding Arab Health as well. And we will share after the webinar with you all the presentation that we have. We have it now. Now, Yazan, he will start now to give us introduction about the Arab Health event.
Thank you, Hala. I would just like to give a small introduction to Arab Health. So this webinar is dedicated to all the British companies within the healthcare and life science sector who will be attending Arab Health, which will be held in Dubai between 28th and the 31st of January. You may all be aware of Arab Health. It's one of the largest healthcare exhibitions in the region and in the Middle East, actually, and offers attendees the chance to showcase UK healthcare expertise and services to the region. Last year's events attracted more than 200 UK organizations and more than 100,000 visitors from 160 countries. Our CEO, Stuart D'Souza, will now be joining the line, and he'll be introducing AEI and giving a brief introduction to Vision 2030 and how to succeed in the kingdom.
Thanks, Yazan. Good morning, everyone. From Riyadh, my name is Stuart D'Souza. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AEI. I hope you can all see the slides. Just a couple of brief words about us. We're a Saudi business, a consulting practice and support services company. We effectively support Western businesses to enter the Saudi market and then win and deliver business in the kingdom. We're not ever trying to be an agent or a distributor or anything like that. We're purely a consulting services business. We've helped nearly 1,000 companies, mainly British and American, to export to Saudi and to be successful in the kingdom. we're also the partner to the UK Department for International Trade. So those of you that pick up the phone to your regional trade advisors, to the Chambers of Commerce, to the Business Council, or indeed to DIT at the embassy, most of you will be referred to one of the AEI consultants for some preliminary advice and guidance about doing business in the Kingdom. There's no secret to being successful in Saudi, but obviously, having helped nearly 1,000 companies now to be successful, we are very familiar with how to plan and prepare for success, if you like, from a best practice perspective. And one of the questions we always get asked is Vision 2030 actually real? And the answer is very much yes. Vision 2030, for those of you that don't know, is the very ambitious reform program that was promulgated in 2016 by the Crown Prince, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And it is a root and branch reform program of every aspect of Saudi government, including not only spending, but also in terms of future revenues, training, and every aspect of life. And obviously that's had a considerable cultural as well as an economic impact. Vision 2030 is an unprecedented opportunity, really. It's the first time in Saudi Arabia, at least, that the Saudi government has issued a formal written policy for anything. So we have if you are a British company, you can align your products and services to the objectives of a particular ministry. It's written down, you know what the ministry is trying to achieve. You not have less reliance on having to figure out what's going on in the ministry on a day-to-day basis. It also means, of course, if you're trying to sell something, a product or service that isn't within the particular objectives of a specific ministry, you're really going to struggle to get any traction at all from a funding perspective and from a requirements perspective. Vision 2030 is focused on two key objectives. Firstly, the employment of Saudi nationals. That's creating jobs for Saudis, and in the Kingdom that's referred to as Saudization. You may be aware that the population of the Kingdom is about 31 million, but about a third, even 35% of those people are expats. And there is obviously a major drive supported by legislation and a very formal quota system to drive the employment of Saudi nationals. But equally, Vision 2030 is also about the diversification of the economy away from oil and providing alternative sources of revenue for the government. The principal vehicle that is delivering a lot of Vision 2030 is something called the Public Investment Fund. Now, the Public Investment Fund has actually been around since 1971, but it's really had a massive reinvigoration in the last couple of years, and is not quite a sovereign wealth fund just yet, but is well on its way to being a sovereign wealth fund, and has ambitions to have about $2 trillion worth of assets under management. And that includes investments overseas, with the Kingdom seeking to be an investment powerhouse around the world, but also having an interest in significant parts of the Saudi economy where government spending is going to be focused going forward. A key element of Vision 2030 is privatisation and allowing the private sector to do more. It remains to be seen exactly how that is going to work, and some of the objectives of the Public Investment Fund seem to be often at odds with that privatisation agenda. But I think the important thing to remember is that it's early days. We're 2 years into Vision 2030. In broad terms, they have kept up with commitments that they made previously, that objectives that have been made previously have been delivered against. It's worth, if you have the time and the inclination, to read a paper that was published in mid-2016 called Balancing the Budget, which set out that by 2021, 22, 23, the budget would be balanced, and the deficit would be cleared, and there would be a number of new taxes, the removal of subsidies, and the Kingdom, for the first time since in a number of years, would go to the international debt market to raise debt to fund expenditure. And they've broadly stuck to all of those commitments. And that, of course, has created new revenue sources for the government. But there are great challenges. We've seen an immediate cultural impact, which I think, to be fair, is which might be characterized as sort of rather low-hanging fruit in terms of opening cinemas and more public entertainment and sport and things like that. The granting of licenses to women to drive in the middle of last year was obviously a great step forward. But we're yet to see the major economic reforms that will really drive foreign investment in particular. Now, in the healthcare sector, actually, it's worth understanding that this is all the journey that the whole of the government is on, not just the Ministry of Health, but the regulations surrounding foreign direct investment in the health sector have just been changed in the last couple of weeks. And now foreign ownership is permitted, 100% foreign ownership is permitted in health centers and radiology centers and labs and surgical facilities. And this is what is more of a substantive change. So yes, cinemas and public events are great, but it's the reform of regulations that really is going to kickstart Vision 2030 from an economic perspective. And we're now seeing those changes beginning to kick in. It's sort of 18 months, 2 years since the launch of Vision 2030, and that first period has very much been focused on getting the infrastructure in place to deliver Vision 2030, drafting regulations, preparing ministries for the change really to move from an operating environment into being more of a regulator. So that's Vision 2030, and if anybody has any sort of more detailed questions, then please do get in touch with the team at the embassy afterwards. I'm sure they'll be happy to respond to them. Equally, you can ask questions throughout the webinar. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's a questions panel, and you can type in questions, and I think we're going to address some of those at the end. My last slide, I've got a couple of minutes to go, is just about how to do business in the kingdom. And these buzzwords are applicable in any market, but we really stress that Saudi Arabia is a very challenging place to do business. And success is often hard won in Saudi Arabia. And those people who are successful are generally those people who take the time to plan their entry into the market. You need patience. It's not a market where you can fly over and in 1 week secure a multi-million-pound contract. Our mantra of commit, don't commute, I appreciate it's easier said than done, particularly for smaller businesses. But it's crucial when setting the appropriate expectations with your leadership in your businesses about how long it's going to take to win business and how long it's going to take to win business and how much investment may be required in terms of visits and that sort of thing. The last 3 points I'll make about a presence and having a partner. So having a presence here is important. It doesn't necessarily mean setting up a company, and you will always be told that you must have a partner to do business in Saudi Arabia. Now, that's not necessarily 100% true, and the nature of that relationship with that partner doesn't necessarily have to be exclusive. You could have more than one partner. You could be a prime contractor and the partner could be a subcontractor in the kingdom. There are various different ways to do business here depending on what you're selling, how you're going, what your route to market is, how your customer is procuring the goods or services as well. The final point, and I'm sure Ken will talk about this as well, but payment. Payment remains a major issue in the kingdom. And of course, we're talking about delayed payment rather than default on payment. And if you're a small, medium-sized business, I would encourage you to get hold of UK Export Finance and see what support they can provide you. But you need to be working on the basis that you may not get paid for 6 to 9 months, maybe even 12 months in some cases, and always ask for a mobilization payment. We've had clients who've achieved regularly 10, 20% mobilization payments, and that just helps with cash flow throughout those sort of initial periods of delivery. Okay, and that's it for me.
Hi, Stuart. It's Ken. Am I next? Should I?
Yes, you're next. Yeah, sorry, Ken.
Okay.
Yeah.
No apologies. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Stuart, I'm based out of Riyadh. My name's Ken Anderson. I've been with the Ministry of Health as a senior advisor for the past 2 years. So a lot of the things that Stuart uh, spoke about just a moment ago have been basically put in place by the folks that I advise. And I would agree with him. I think healthcare actually has probably been at the forefront of the change, and particularly around the privatization efforts. Just briefly, healthcare is an important vertical, as you might imagine, in any governmental entity or any government. And healthcare is basically been brought to the forefront because not only is it an issue around public health, it's also highly politicized as it is in the UK. The one good thing from a UK perspective is that much of the advice that the Ministry of Health has gotten, and even though I've got the wrong accent, I come from an NHS-centric background, has been around the National Health Service. Not necessarily a complete overlay of the NHS, but taking the aspects of the NHS that make sense for Saudi Arabia, the good things, understanding the things that haven't gone quite right, maybe making some changes and plugging those into the system as well. The leadership at the Ministry of Health, to their credit, took 2 years actually, even before I arrived, to fly around to different countries and observe how they provided healthcare, what worked, what didn't work, and more importantly, what might they be able to pull out and create a Saudi health system from. So this is not a take the NHS and then plant it or lay it over the top of the Saudi Arabian system. They've sat down and very, very, I think, effectively created a Saudiized health system from various components globally. But I would have to say that the majority of the components that have come together are probably from the UK system, because they very much like that. And there's an awful lot of things that you will recognize from the national health system in the current, either the construct or the implementation or the fact that it's up and running within the Saudi health system. And that includes things like NICE. They took that and they found that to be something of value and are creating a replica of NICE in a Saudiized way. You'll recognize that they've gone into basically a commercialization of their healthcare assets around the hospital systems, as opposed to an immediate privatization. Again, reflecting what Stuart has said around the theme of Vision 2030 and how it's going to basically be rolled out across all of the different components of government. They do have a privatization agenda. However, the Ministry of Health decided that probably commercializing the current assets and then looking at, once those were in place, and we had a payment mechanism that worked overlaid over the top of them, and we started to be able to measure outcomes and understand what the different KPIs and metrics were going to be, then we should look at privatization. And that was part of the advice that I was involved in as well. And so what you'll see in our corporatization agenda is very much the Foundation Trust Network, but again, with an overlay that is very much Saudi. But you'll recognize an awful lot of the tenets and the component parts of that. And so where we are right now in the process, we've sat down, or they have, I've advised, and they've sat down and they've come up with the health system they want for Saudi Arabia. We're in the throes of the implementation of the corporatization agenda across all of the MOH hospitals. And when you look at healthcare, you should remember that only 60% of healthcare is provided in the kingdom is provided by the Ministry of Health. The National Guard has their own health system. The Ministry of the Interior has their own health system, and the universities and several others. And so there's another 40% of health that's provided by these component parts of the governmental entities that surround the holistic government. But what you're starting to see is, because the Ministry of Health, I believe, is significantly further ahead than the others, there's an increasing conversation around what we're calling the whole health agenda of transformation. And you may see those other components of health delivery start to be rolled into the broader MOH health system. And I think that would be appropriate given how far they've come and the significant progress in a positive manner they've made around the whole transformation. So just going back briefly to where we are, we're in the throes of putting together the corporatization piece. We've just announced just yesterday the CEO of what we're calling Holdco, which is where the assets will sit, and then the operations will be provided on a local basis, and therefore they're going to be very much focused on individuals. The privatization ownership that Stuart mentioned a moment ago is absolutely key to what we're doing, and that is we have to have, if there's the largest deficit in the healthcare provision in Saudi Arabia right now is the front end of the system. So therefore, it's basically the personalized healthcare around GPs. There is not really any functioning primary care aspect of Saudi health that we would recognize in the Western world, and they've absolutely identified that as a massive hole. And so this new change in ownership structures is specifically been brought in basically to get people not dissimilar to BUPA. BUPA is very, very big in the insurance market, and several others who are starting to build these primary care front ends to allow them to do that, and to allow them to do that under 100% ownership and have security or at least a lot less risk around putting them in place. One of the things that I would say that's probably different, significantly different in Saudi is you have at the very top of the delivery system, so around the large hospitals, you have a lot of competition, and therefore you'd recognize the fact that they're trying to hold on to things like imaging diagnostics, lab services, and some of the peripheral services that are key to basically the front end of the large teaching hospitals. And so there's a lot of competition and pushback from the public sector in that area. But primary care, unlike the UK where you've got a massive GP, private sector GP system, and they tend to push back, that's not even here. And so primary care is an open goal in some respects, which is not the UK, actually probably any place in the rest of the West. But just to finish off, and I know I'm running a little bit long, what I would say is that if you have UK healthcare expertise, and particularly around primary care or how you can integrate systems, this is a wonderful place to operate. I don't disagree with Stuart, and by the way, I have to give credit to AEI. They are our partner, and Stuart and his team have been instrumental in helping my little firm that I operate through to basically put down roots in Saudi and get through just some of the minutia that is mind-bogglingly difficult to operate in, unless, like Stuart and his team, and I also have to say the embassy folks, they understand it succinctly. And so they're a wonderful resource. I couldn't say enough positive things about Stuart and the AEI team. I'd highly recommend you getting to know them if you are looking at the Saudi Arabian market at all. And you need to have a lot of operating capital, and you absolutely should be talking to the embassy on the credit system that they've just put in place, which I wish had been in place when we first got going. But just to finish off, there's huge opportunity at the front end of the system. There's actually huge opportunity into the hospitals if you have transformation expertise, and you can come in and help people put in place the metrics necessary to run the hospitals efficiently, because they're not like most other places in the world. Just briefly, for any of those folks who are on that maybe come out of the life sciences pharma area, they are actively looking for partners in that area. They do not want solutions looking for problems. So you should do your homework, as Stuart said, about the marketplace. There is a massive opportunity for the life sciences and pharma folks. But going back to Stuart's advice, you're going to have to put down some roots here. They don't want to have a Me Too manufacturing plant that maybe is doing secondary work and is just bringing the from an R&D perspective, they're looking for a full R&D relationship. They want the research dollars or pounds, which of course translate into real jobs. But that again is an absolute open goal in some respects, and one you should definitely talk to the embassy folks or AEI about. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I'm sorry, I think I ran a little bit long.
So we have now Sophie to talk about the life science plans during Arab Health.
Hi, good morning. So I am Sophie Schumann. So I've started, just a quick introduction. So I started back with the life sciences team in October. So I am the market manager for covering the Gulf, but I also cover North America. So the life sciences stand, so it's the DIT stand, and we are sharing it. We cover kind of 2/3 of the stand, and then the other part of the stand is shared with the Northern Powerhouse and Midlands End, taking out some companies. And then we're also partnered with ABHI, so the Association of British Health Tech Industries, and they are also bringing out kind of over 140 companies. So there's a big UK presence that will be about the place. So the main life sciences focus is our stand is kind of set up for one-to-one meetings. So we have commercial officers coming from over 13 countries. So I think you can see there on the slides, you've got a good selection from all over the place, obviously with a focus mainly on GCC, but there's some other places as well. So it's kind of a chance for companies to meet with the commercial officers and have a chat with them about entering the market, any advice they need to know, how best to work. Like you said, you know, it's best to have a presence here, give you that country specific advice for the different countries. The main thing to note with that, if you are coming out, that all of the commercial officers are there for all of the time, and they will have their own meetings as well. So it's advised to if you are going to book online. I've included the link there so that you can book that. And along with that, we then also have 2 of our specialists coming out. So we've got Ravi Chana, so he's the medtech specialist, can offer you a whole host of advice. So if there's any questions, it would be best to kind of come along to the stand and find out when he's available, and can have a sit down or chat with him and put you in contact. He has a lot of different contacts for in the UK for different things you might need, but as well as providing advice. And if China is to be kind of on your list of places that you're considering, we will have our China specialist there as well, who will be able to have a chat with you. The main event that kind of life sciences is running, so it's also will be on the Monday evening, so it's going to be hosted at the Embassy Garden, and it will have a big attendance. So there's going to be over 500 guests, kind of a split between UAE and Gulf stakeholders. So we think it's going to be roughly around 200 of those, and then 300 UK visitors or exhibitors. And then along with that, we have set up an innovation showcase. So there'll be different companies kind of showing their medtech innovations that they have in the garden. So kind of like a display that you can go around and have a look at and see what we've got, and promoting the UK. So that is an invite only, but if you are going to be coming out to Arab Health and you think it'd be worthwhile, the guest list is still being finalised, so we can see if there's any space in that. So if you can let us know, I think we can, when we send out the presentation, I can provide my contact details so that you can make yourself known. But at the moment, that's the main event that we're going to have running on the evening. Yeah, I think that's everything I have to cover.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello, good morning, everyone. I am Fabiola I'm the program manager for the Middle East team. here at Healthcare UK, based in DIT. I have been asked to talk to you about our role at Arab Health and in the events we are leading on. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to give you a very, very quick overview of Healthcare UK, just in case you haven't worked with us before. So Healthcare UK is a joint initiative of the Department of International Trade, NHS England, and the Department of Health and Social Care. So I work really closely with Sophie here in DIT, but also Healthcare UK is also funded by the Department of Health and by NHS England. So work also really closely directly with DHSC, so with Department of Health and with NHSE. Our main objective is to help UK healthcare providers to do more business overseas. And specifically, as I mentioned earlier, I focus on the Middle East. And we help both UK private healthcare organizations and also public sector organizations, for example, NHS trusts. And our main objective is, as I was saying, to promote UK healthcare sector in the overseas market, and also support partnerships between UK and overseas healthcare providers. And we use our network to facilitate the government engagement for large healthcare programs. And of course, we couldn't do this without our commercial officers at Post. So I always want to stress that our work here in London is couldn't be done without the commercial officers overseas. So in Saudi, in this case, essential. So this takes me really nicely to the event that we are leading on at Arab and arranging at Arab Health. So to give you an idea, my role at Arab Health is to coordinate the whole HMG presence overall, but specifically I am managing the first day event. So Monday the 28th of January, there will be an event that I am working on and arranging, which is specifically to speak about the GCC healthcare market and to support UK companies that are interested in pursuing the GCC market. So it's really for UK organizations that are considering to approach the overseas market that maybe haven't done this before, both in healthcare and in life sciences. And this event will really offer the opportunity to learn about some of the similarities, but also the differences across the GCC. So it's not Saudi focused, but it will be across the whole of the GCC, and how we approach these markets effectively. And also market opportunities will be highlighted across the whole value supply chain continuum. So really what we are going to stress in this event is how you can approach specific opportunities and as an individual, but also how many opportunities, because of how big they are and how complex they are also can be approached as a group. And so, in other words, how you can really collaborate with other organizations. And the most important part of this event will really be the fact that you will have the opportunity to directly interact with our commercial officers, because we will have commercial officers from across the GCC, so from Saudi, from Oman, from Bahrain, from the UAE. And so they will be able to specifically address any concern that you have regarding a specific market or a specific opportunity or opportunity area. And there will also be, after so there will be a panel where there will be a senior member of the British government opening the event and speaking, as I was saying, a bit at a high level of the differences between the market, the GCC healthcare markets, and also similarities. But then there will be an opportunity for Q&A, which is really the heart of the event, where you will be able to address these questions directly, talking to the British embassies across the market. And then there will be a networking event where you will, with obviously food and drinks, where there is opportunity to have like one-to-one discussions with commercial officers if at all required. And this is really the key events that we are arranging for UK, so the key audiences, UK companies, private and public, both from healthcare and the life sciences sector. So if you are attending Arab Health and you are not aware of this event or you are interested in attending, please let me know and I will send an invite to you all. And of course, when we have the Q&A now, please let me know if you have any questions regarding this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fabiola. Now, coming to the end of the webinar, we'll be taking questions from anyone who has any questions. Please type them on the right side of your screen. We'll start with the first question we have, and it's for Monica. It says, how do we arrange for prompt payment terms?
Well, Monica, this is Stuart. It's unfortunately not quite straightforward. So even if you have defined payment terms, whether that's a 30-day payment term or payment milestone plan in your contract, it can be very difficult to ensure prompt payment. Now, obviously, if you're exporting goods or materials or equipment or kit, payment protection is slightly easier to achieve in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, you can ask for things like letters of credit. There are more obvious UK export finance products available as well to underpin payment. And of course, you just won't actually ship any of the goods until you either received 100% payment up front or potentially 90% on payment and then 10% on acceptance. The biggest issue certainly is for those of you providing services in the kingdom. If you're providing consultancy services or training services, then you're more likely to be working in a sort of payment in arrears based on specific deliverables being accepted. In those cases, it is more difficult to secure payment. Certainly, being here and having support on the ground to chase payments through the finance departments of the various ministries or government agencies or indeed private companies that you might be dealing with. And of course, really delayed payment is principally a government problem. Not always, but principally. And for the private sector, again, you're far more flexible to ask for greater funding up front and that sort of thing. For consulting contracts, certainly I would always ask for a mobilization payment. Ask for 30 or 40%. You won't get that, but you might achieve 5, 10, 15, in some cases 20% up front. And that will just help you with those initial months, those initial period of performance from a cash flow perspective.
Okay. Second question we have is from Jean, sorry. Are there any FX restrictions, foreign exchange restrictions?
Any foreign exchange restrictions? So obviously for contracts priced in sterling, if you're dealing with the Saudi government, generally speaking, I would say in probably 99% of cases, they'll contract you in Saudi Arabian riyals. And you'll have to submit pricing and proposals in Saudi Arabian riyals as well. The Saudi riyal is actually pegged to the US dollar. So from a hedging perspective, it is fairly easy to hedge currency, but for shorter term deliveries, you'll probably just have to deal with a short term risk. Obviously, if you can price in dollars, if you've got equipment coming from outside the UK, then pricing in dollars is obviously very helpful as well. But otherwise, there's no major sort of financial exchange issues beyond normal Forex exchange rate risk.
Okay, next question is, can you give an idea of the range of fees, percentages that agencies charge?
Well, Monica, I'm not sure what sector you're in, but you have to be very careful about using agents in the kingdom. Certainly if you're looking at exporting equipment and you need a local company that would import your equipment, that would register your products with the relevant government body, whether that's the Saudi Food and Drug Authority or the Ministry of Commerce, you're then talking more of a sort of distributor type model. If you're looking for an agent, so Monica, you just said you're in consultancy and education. I would suggest that you don't need an agent it's in its normal sense. You might need a partner, and again, you shouldn't really be working with people who are working on the basis of a percentage. in consultancy and education. Ideally, you want to be talking about people who are adding or who are delivering a manageable and meaningful work share in contribution to what you're providing. In some cases, you might have to have a local partner from a payment perspective, in which case you might see some charges, I don't know, 5–7.5%, maybe something like that. But I would really caution you against entering into any of those sorts of agreements unless it's absolutely essential.
Okay.
Question from another one from Monica about UK VAT. I'm not able to really answer that. I don't think it's applicable on exports, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, next question is what are the usual turnaround times for getting decisions made, i.e. time intervals between request for proposal and proposal submission?
Yeah, okay. So that's another question from Monica. So it's very difficult to say. Saudi Arabia tends to be what we sort of describe as a rush, stop type environment where everything is desperately urgent, and you will be pushed to get a proposal submitted, and then you won't hear anything for months. That's becoming less common, particularly on the back of Vision 2030, because the government now has very clearly identified objectives to move forward. In the last couple of years, there have been issues with budgeting and funding availability. But again, I would usually say 6 months, 3 to 6 months from an RFP coming out, you would reasonably, if it's real and if it's going to happen, then you could reasonably expect a contract to be awarded. Obviously, it depends on the time of year as well. The summer tends to be fairly quiet. Ramadan, there won't be many things signed off during Ramadan, but it's difficult to be prescriptive. But there's no substitute for actually having, obviously, intelligence and insight from the ground as to, well, does the customer actually have a budget? Are there enough bidders? The customer, if it's a government customer, they have to have at least 3 qualified bids in order to proceed with the procurement. And that sort of information is best derived from being on the ground in the kingdom.
Thanks, Stuart. Next question is for Aya, and it's from Brody. It says, thanks. How does NTP 2020, particularly with the objectives of the Ministry of Health?
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you for participating in the webinar today. So NTP 2020 relies directly with the objective of the Ministry of Health. I would mention the 3 areas that they have in common is working together through the PPP, privatization area, and the digital theme as well in the education and training side. So the private sector participation for most of the companies that with us today, I can mention like a couple of areas that they are at focus at the moment. As you may aware that there are 9 initiatives that the Ministry of Health and the Visualization Office along with the NTP are focusing at, and there is a framework, a document that I'm happy to share with all of you after the call so you can understand more at each one of these initiatives what they are planning to do. I would mention the most important 3 areas now for them in the private sector would be the primary care, and this is something that Ken actually mentioned, where they're trying to find service providers and other companies who can rely on these areas. And the second one of them, which they have a really big gap, a huge gap, and it is the rehabilitation, home care, and the long-term care. So there are many initiatives that and tenders that are coming from these one. So if you find particularly yourself a company that providing these kind of services in these initiatives, please do connect with us and let us know what you do to see how we connect you with them. The third area I would like to mention about is the radiology and the labs. It's still in its early stages, but I would from now understand what the ministry is looking at and what they are looking to develop in these two areas, and that will be mentioned in the framework that I said that I will be sharing it after the webinar. Hope this will answer the question.
Thank you, Aya. We have another question from Nigel, and he's saying, are there medical device distributors operating in Saudi? In short answer is yes, there are plenty of medical device distributors in Saudi, but we always recommend that you do the proper due diligence to try and find a suitable partner, so you can avoid any contract problems or payment problems later on. The next question we have, and I think this one might be addressed for Aya. Are there any strategic areas of focus from the Saudi government for healthcare?
Yes, so I think they are kind of the same two questions. As I mentioned before, I would really keen to focus on the primary care area and long-term home care and rehabilitation. I think these are most strategic area that they're looking into.
Thank you, Aya. Okay, the next question we have, where do the government publish contracts available?
Well, there's no sort of central repository of tenders. There are people who purport to offer a sort of tendering service where you can sign up, but that's not the way to approach the market, particularly for a Western business. Those sorts of tenders are what are generally described as public tenders, which will be a sort of lowest price type model for the purchase of basic goods and services. A lot of government contracting is done on an invite-only basis, so there's a pre-qualification process. Tom, depending on which sector you're in, I would advise that you look at prioritizing particular ministries, or particularly, obviously in healthcare, there are, as Ken was saying, only 60% of the sort of medical system is under the Ministry of Health. There's also a lot under the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of the National Guard, and you may want to look at trying to pre-register with those ministries to then receive tenders. They get issued on a sort of fairly regular basis. There's also medical transformation programs happening in not only the Ministry of Health, but also medical specific transformation in the Ministry of Defence. So any of you who are interested in those sorts of programs, please do get in touch with us.
Thanks, Stuart. Next question is, does Saudi look to FDA or MHRA or have its own device regulations, medical device compliance? Yes, Saudi has own regulations which are mandated by and regulated by the Saudi Food and Drug Authority. Now, they are very much similar to the American FDA, but of course, in some cases, there might be specific requirements, and that depends on the type of device that you're looking to import to Saudi Arabia. Sorry there, I think we have a problem with the mic. For the rest of the questions, we're gonna send a follow-up email to all the attendees with my email and Hala's and Aya's, and you can always drop us an email with any further questions that you have, and we will be glad to answer them. Also, we will be attending Arab Health, and we'd be happy to set up meetings and to meet you at the show to discuss any other matters further. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and I hope you find it useful. And we will send you all the slides and all the links by email shortly. Thank you very much.